night special coming around the bend. It broke, but never blew before. $7:53. If you're out there, I'm going to be starting in 7 minutes. Whenever you have an atomic clock, they tell me that it's accurate within 2 seconds every, I don't know, 10 millennium or something ridiculous like that. But I'm all set. You can see I have a piano. I hope the volume is okay. Let me see. Probably come a little bit closer. For some reason, my monitor isn't working again. Let's check a little harmonica here. Let's see how the harmonica's doing. Should be able. And good test. I think my voice is pretty well heard. There we go. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Three minutes to showtime. Yeah. Oh. That's where I keep my fruit juice. That's what's in there, fruit juice. There. Well, according to my atomic clock, which I believe is on Mars, it is exactly 8 o'clock. So let's begin. I have a little agenda written out over there. First, let me say hello, greetings, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Festivus, I guess. Might as well stick that in there as well. Welcome to all. I'm Stephen, and I have a nice show for you tonight. This is a pilot that I'm working on, so I welcome your feedback. If you look right here, 845-545-3892. I'll read it again, 845-545-3892. You can text me at that number, or you could call me. Keep in mind, if you call me, there's going to be about a 10-second delay. Remember, the signal's coming from here. It's going from my camera into my computer to YouTube, and then back to me again like that. So there'll be a delay. Text me is probably a good way. But if you want to talk, you have to turn your computer off and just use headphones. And don't look at the machine because it's not going to, the voices are not going to be synced with the visual. I thought I'd start with a little piece of fanfare. Fanfare for a Common Man. Probably if I had to pick a favorite musician, it would be Aaron Copland. I know a lot of his work. I love it. And fanfare, which he wrote a lot of fanfares. They were a way to start shows. He wrote this one and people liked it so much that it became part of his Third Symphony. But it was written, I'll look at the date here, it's 1944. It was written during World War II, as were a lot of his pieces. And it kind of had that angst about it, bluesy sort of feel. And World War II was going on. And it's certainly not a happy time for a lot of people, especially in America. So I've tried recording this and uploading this to Facebook, but every time I hit the record button on my phone, I just kind of mess the whole thing up. But let me give it a shot here. This is Fanfare a Common Man, just a little excerpt. Fanfare for a Common Man. Probably a lot of people that don't know the classical one know the Emerson, Lake and Palmer version of it. Fanfare for a Common Man. And just check out the Third Symphony. So here's what the program is going to be. Tell you, I'm working with some storytelling. I'm going to tell you a story in a minute at 12,000 Days of Christmas. Yes, 12,000 Days of Christmas. I'm going to do a little bit of reading from The Story of My Life by Helen Keller. And I chose this book because of its copyright date. I've been dealing with this issue about copyrights with literature and music, and I'm trying to be respectful of it. But this book was written over 100 years ago, so there's no longer a copyright claim with it. I'm going to read a nice little chapter about it. And then I'm going to show you how some of the music from 100 years ago is still with us today. A very prominent chord pattern. Any blues musician or jazz musician knows that it's called the 1-4-5, and we'll get to it like that. Then I'm going to do one or two live songs. I have a song I wrote about Anne Frank many, many years ago, and a song I wrote about Pete Seeger that I'm calling San Pedro, but I'll probably I'll probably not go with that name. And then I'll sign off with another good study from my days when I was teaching at Lehman College. It was a very poignant moment. So here's the 12,000 Days of Christmas. 12,000 Days of Christmas. I think it was about 1983, 84. And I was no longer a roadie. I luckily picked back up on my piano tuning business. I had done it a little bit before I was a roadie, and then I went on the road. And when the road shows were all over and I wasn't a roadie anymore, I became a piano tuner. I worked for a place called Renard Piano in the Bronx, and I built up a clientele. And often I would get a job from Renard Piano that would give me the ticket. And after a while, I used to share the money with them, and actually they were really nice about it. They told me to keep all the money that I made from it. I didn't have to give them a cut anymore, as long as I keep their customers happy, which I wanted to do. We were a Baldwin dealer, but we also rebuilt pianos. Anyway, one of the customers, I don't remember how we got him, but it was from Renard. I get a call on Christmas Eve, December 24th, at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's from one of my piano tuning customers. And he's desperate. He goes, "Oh, Mr. Powers, I'm so glad I got hold of you. I'm hiring Al Hurt, famous jazz trumpet player, to perform at our Christmas party." He worked for some big corporation. It was in Westchester County. And I was like, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's like Christmas Eve. He says, "I'll pay you anything." I think at that point I was getting $38 a piano. So I said, "Well, I have nothing to lose." And I went, $150. And he went, "You got it." So I went, "Well, that's not bad." So he gives me the location, he get all the information. He says, "Well, I'm not going to be there." He says, "You're going to go up to this was huge corporate headquarters up on 119 in Irvington, not Irvington. I think it was Irvington. I forget the village anyway. Elmsford. Doesn't matter. 119 heading over to White Plains, more towards the Somme River Parkway, if you know where that is." And he says, "Nobody's going to be there, of course. We're all gone. Everybody's going to come back at 6 o'clock. You have the whole building to yourself to fix up the piano. There's a janitor there. He'll let you in. He's going to leave, but you don't need him. So good luck." So I show up at the place. I'm very excited because I'm getting like 4 times the amount of money. And it's this huge building. And where the piano was on the main floor of this building, which was like a banquet hall. I would say you could probably it was a huge place. You could probably sit like 500-600 people in it. And in the room there, just by itself, I guess we're going to have dancing or bring chairs in later, was this guy's piano. Now, let me tell you something about his piano. It was really just a piece of junk, this piano was. Besides having a terrible sound, it was hard to tune because on pianos, if you ever look inside, there's the tuning pins, and that's what holds the strings. If you think of a guitar, those little things you turn, it serves the same purpose. The difference is it's not a little handle. You bring what they have called a tuning hammer, and you put it on and you tune it like that. Maybe I'll take a break later. We'll go show you a tuning hammer. So the piano's all there by itself. This little crappy baby grand piano with a terrible sound. But I want to do a good job because I'm getting paid good money. I know this guy. It's always good to be good to your customers. And it was Al Hurt. I wasn't really a big Al Hurt fan, but he was kind of a famous guy. So I start setting up to tune the piano. And janitor comes over. He says, because I could see the guy is just dying to get out of there. It's Christmas Eve. I don't blame him. He's like, "Look, do you need anything?" I'm like, "No, not really." He says, "I got to go." And there was like 10 doors in this place. He says, "You can walk out any door with a fire door with the bar. Use any door that you want when you leave." "And you sure?" I'm saying, "Absolutely." And he leaves. And as I start setting up to tune the piano, to tune a piano, there's about 250 strings in the piano. And you're always tuning one string to the other, but you have to quiet most of the strings. You can't be trying to tune, you set one string that's correct, like with a tuning fork, and then you're going to tune the second string to that first one. That's what piano tuners do. But you can't have any other musical sounds. You're really just tuning one string to another string. That's how it always is. And the way you do it is, if you look inside a piano, there are 3 strings in the middle part of the piano, and they're all the same note. And why are there 3 strings? For volume. In fact, piano forte means loud and soft. Piano soft, forte is loud. So that was the thing about pianos. Now they were loud. Well, harpsichords used to just have one string that was plucked. Now pianos had 3 strings in the midsection. And down in the bass, there were double bass strings, and only the last 5 or 6 strings were like single strings, and they were very, very big strings like that. So I'm prepping the piano, you're putting all these felts in like that. And just as I'm kind of in the middle of doing it, all of a sudden I hear on the music system in the ceiling, I'm not going to bore you with the whole song. You know what it is. 12 Days of Christmas. But it doesn't really matter now because I'm still getting the piano ready. And besides, I figure probably cycling through the system once, it's just going to kind of go off. So I'm ready to tune the piano. I'm all set. And actually, the song does go off. It stops, and I'm like, oh, thank God, because if you think it's tough to just kind of tune a piano with some of the other strings sounding, music is the last thing in the world that I need to hear. In fact, it would make tuning the piano nearly impossible. So the music stops, and I'm all set. Really excited. This huge, big hall all by myself. And I'm just about to start to tune, and guess what happens? The whole song. I'm like, no. What am I going to do? Can't go on forever. I can't call the guy. He's gone, and there's literally nobody else in this big building. So I'm thinking, all right, maybe it's going to play it one more time. You just kind of sit back and relax. Song stops. I'm like, I was worried about nothing. Getting ready to tune. Get what happens. Apparently, I don't know who was in charge of the music system, but not only did they leave it on to play music, but they just left it on to play this one song, the 12 Days of Christmas, over and over and over. I thought about the piano was on a dolly. It was a tiny little piano. You could move it around. I thought about moving it to different places. I tried it over in this part of the room. I tried it over here. I tried it over here. I mean, literally, the entire room ceiling had speakers like every 30 feet. So there was like no place where I could get underneath the piano, get underneath the speaker and tune the piano. Remember, I can't have any music. And even if I could probably find a spot, it wouldn't matter. It was a big empty room and had linoleum floors. The sound was bouncing all over the place. For like 2 hours, it kept going on. So what was I going to do? So I figured out, the song. But you know the part that goes, 5 golden rings. And there's like a little pause there. And then it goes, 4 calling birds, 3 French doves, 2 doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. So what I had to do was wait for that part of 5 golden rings and quickly tune the piano. And then wait, 4 calling birds, 3 French, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. And then after it went through all 12 days of Christmas, the song would stop. And it must have been a dozen times when I was like, oh, finally that's it, but... So I kept sitting there like this, And then 5 golden rings, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. It finally came to my realization that this was just a really crappy piano, and no matter how long I spent tuning it, it really wasn't going to work that well anyway. So I did my best, and I left. I wasn't quite sure if it was a good job or not, but I couldn't really hear it, and it was kind of a crappy piano. But I called the guy on Monday and asked him how it was, and he was like, "Oh, it's totally great show. We kind of loved it." So 12,000 Days of Christmas. Now you know why I kind of hate that song. This is a good book to read. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's really rather simple. It's The Story of My Life by Helen Keller. I would think that most people probably know her story, but just a little quick background. She was born, was in the late 1800s in Alabama, I believe. Let me look. I'll say something I think she said. In Alabama. And to, what was his name? Captain Keller. It was in Alabama, or I suspect he probably was called Captain Keller because he might have been in the Confederacy, I suspect. It was the late 1890s, I believe. She was born hearing and seeing, but when she was an infant, she got rubella. And it destroyed her hearing, and it destroyed her sight. And back in 1890, around that time, it wasn't very well equipped to deal with those sort of children like that. And she developed in the beginning, as she got older then, for the first couple of years in her life, there was other family members, and she learned to deal with them. She created what they called home signs. I do know when I grew up in Riverdale, across the street, there was a kid in the neighborhood. She was deaf, and several of us knew her. She was younger than me, so I didn't really talk with her that much. Although I did meet her later on when I took American Sign Language at Lehman College. We had a project. We had to go talk to someone who knew sign language, and I forget how I located her, but I did. She was a neighbor of mine. But one of my younger brothers actually talked to her, and they used home signs. This would kind of mean come on, and this would mean stop. But that only goes so far. And from what she says in her book, she had a really bad temper. And I guess it was kind of frustrated, particularly when she couldn't see or hear anymore. And if you think that she couldn't see, she could see, she could do this sign to someone who could see, but if they did that to her, it would make a difference. So there were even different kind of home signs for somebody like her. This is from chapter 4. The most important day I remember in all my life is the one in which my teacher, Anne Mansfield Sullivan, came to me. I am filled with wonder when I consider the immeasurable contrast between the two lives which it connects. It was the 3rd of March, 1887, 3 months before I was 7 years old. On that afternoon of that eventful day, I stood on the porch, dumb, expectant. I guessed vaguely from my mother's signs and from the hurrying to and fro in the house that something unusual was about to happen, so I went to the door and waited on the steps. The afternoon sun penetrated the mass of honeysuckle that covered the porch and fell on my upturned face. My fingers lingered almost unconsciously on the familiar leaves and blossoms which had just come forth to greet the sweet southern spring. I did not know what the future held of marvel or surprise for me. Anger and bitterness had preyed upon me continually for weeks, and a deep languor had succeeded this passionate struggle. Have you ever been at sea in a dense fog, when it seemed as if a tangible white darkness shut you in, and the great ship, tense and anxious, groped her way toward the shore with plummet and sounding line, and you waited with beating heart for something to happen? I was like that ship before my education began, and had no way of knowing how near the harbor was. "Light, give me light!" was the wordless cry of my soul, and the light of love alone on me in that very hour, and the light of love shone on me in that very hour. I felt approaching footsteps. I stretched out my hand as I supposed it to be my mother. Someone took it, and I was caught up and held it close in the arms of her who had come to reveal all things to me, and more than all things else, to love me. Anne Sullivan was a student, was the Boston School, I forget the name of the school, for blind and deaf children. Anne Sullivan wasn't blind, but she had a very debilitating eye disease. So she could see, but it wasn't that well. And she was hearing, so she didn't have any problem with hearing. And I believe when she was in that school, I think one of the mentors of the school, if not a founder of the school, was Alexander Graham Bell. And keep in mind that Alexander Graham Bell was interested in hearing, particularly and especially for children of the deaf. But if you think of his other collateral experiment with the telephone, he was certainly interested in how sound is transmitted from one place to another, be that from one human being to another human being, or from one human being through some kind of telepathy to another human being at the other end of that telepathy. Back to the story. The morning after my teacher came, she led me into a room and gave me a doll. The little blind children at the Perkins Institution, that's it, she was at the Perkins Institution, had sent it, and Laura Brigman had dressed it up. But I did not know this until afterward. I suppose Laura Bridgman was a famous doll maker? That's what I suspect. Laura Brigman had dressed it up, but I did not know this until afterward. When I had played with it a little while, Miss Sullivan slowly spelled into my hand the word doll. So I know a little bit of sign language, finger spelling. There are signs. So this means thank you. This means yesterday. This means now. There are different signs for a word, but they also have an alphabet. And Anne Sullivan was trying to teach Helen Keller the alphabet. So here's the alphabet. You could see there's some similarities to our letters, at least. There's a D, O, L, L. Let me turn the other way because this is how it works. D, O, L, L. And actually, the way I learned it, when there's two letters, you go D, O, L, like that. D, O, L. But for Helen Keller, because you couldn't see, she had to spell it in her hand. D, O, L, L. I mean, I'm sure Keller was like, well, what's this? I was at once interested in the finger play and tried to imitate it. When I finally succeeded in making the letters correctly, I was flushed with childish pleasure and pride. Running downstairs to my mother, I held up my hand and made the letters for doll. I didn't know that I was spelling a word or even that words existed. I was simply making my fingers go in monkey-like imitation. In the days that followed, I learned to spell in this uncomprehending way a great many words, among them pin, P-I-N, and hat, H-A-T, H-A-T, hat. And you try to run the same way that you connect letters when we write them. And when we speak them, particularly even in sign language, you don't go H. Well, you can go H-A-T, but usually it's at, H, hat. So what did she spell here? And cup. And a few words like sit, stand, and walk. But my teacher had been with me several weeks before I understood that everything has a name. One day while I was playing with my new doll, Miss Sullivan put my big rag doll into my lap also and spelled D-O-L-L. And tried to make me understand that D-O-L-L applied to both. Earlier in the day, we had tussled over the words mug, M-U-G, and water, or W-A-T-E-R. I'll show you the sign language word for water in a moment. And water. Miss Sullivan had tried to impress upon me that M-U-G is a mug and that W-A-T-E-R is water, but I persisted in confounding the two. In despair, she dropped the subject for the time, only to renew it at the first opportunity. I became impatient at her repeated attempts, and seizing the new doll, I dashed it upon the floor. This was that temper that that was reported about her. I dashed it upon the floor. I was keenly delighted when I felt the fragments of the broken doll at my feet. Neither sorrow nor regret followed my passionate outburst. I had not loved the doll. In the still dark world in which I lived, there was no strong sentiment of tenderness. I felt my teacher sweep the fragments to one side of the hearth, and I had a sense of satisfaction that the cause of my discomfort was removed. She brought me my hat, and I knew I was going out in the warm sunshine. This thought, if a wordless sensation may be called a thought, made me hop and skip with pleasure. We walked down the path to the well house, attracted by the fragrance of the honeysuckle with which it was covered. Someone was drawing water, and my teacher placed my hand under the spout. You know, we're talking about if you look at the old pumps, it was just a manual pump. As the cool stream gushed over one hand, she spelled into the other the word water. First slowly, and then rapidly. I stood still, my whole attention fixed upon the motion of her fingers. Suddenly, I felt a misty consciousness as of something forgotten, a thrill of a returning thought, and somehow the mystery of language was revealed to me. I knew then that W-A-T-E-R meant that wonderful cool something that was flowing over my hand. That living word awakened my soul. It gave it light, hope, joy. It set it free. There were barriers still, it is true, but barriers that could in time be swept away. I left the well house eager to learn. Everything had a name, and every name gave birth to a new thought. As we returned to the house, every object which I touched seemed to quiver with life. That was because I saw everything with the strange new sight that had come to me. It's interesting she uses the word sight. That had come to me. On entering the door, I remembered the doll I had broken. I felt my way to the hearth and picked up the pieces. I tried vainly to put them together. Then my eyes filled with tears, for I realized what I had done. And for the first time, I felt repentance and sorrow. I learned a great many new words that day. I don't remember what they all were. But I do know that mother, father, sister, teacher were among the words that were to make the world blossom for me, like Aaron's rod with flowers. It's a quote. I don't know what it means. It would have been difficult to find a happier child than I was as I lay in my crib at the close of the eventful day and lived over the joys that it brought to me, and for the first time longed for a new day to come. Imagine that. Someone who's blind and deaf saying, it would have been difficult to find a happier child than me. I'm just so moved by this passage. It's just remarkable. What I've thought about over the years with this passage is, how did she write about all this? And before she got language, it wasn't like she couldn't walk around the house. It wasn't like she probably couldn't express things. There's something very interesting to peer into, to think about language. Something I've studied a little bit about is of Lev Vygotsky, is a famous Russian psychologist. He was a lawyer back in the beginning of the 20th century. He had an interesting theory that, and he wasn't the only one, that suggested that words that we understand and we use and say are not the final thing inside our brain, that there's a deeper level of thought that is beyond words. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's certainly something to think about. Okay. I'm going to drink some fruit juice here. I just love grapes, I think. Grape juice is just the best thing ever. So it's 8:32 here on the atomic clock. And I'm going to play the piano in a second. There we go. Let me show you a little book that I have here. This book is nearly 100 years old. It is The American Song Bag by Carl Sandburg. Carl Sandburg was a very well-known poet in the 20th century. And he was very interested in preserving Americana in music and in poetry. And so he traveled around the country and started getting samples of music. And I believe he brought a musicologist with him. So they would sit down, they'd find some people, they'd ask them to sing certain songs or what songs that they knew, and then somebody wrote it down. So these transcriptions are really pretty accurate to what the music was. In fact, that was the whole point. Remember, we're talking about, this book was published in 1927, I believe. Let me just check the date. It's certainly out of print. Yes, 1927. But the songs in this book probably go back to the 1900s. In fact, several of them go back to the 1800s, the late 1800s. You'll see. I'll read you things in a couple of minutes. So there really weren't any recording devices back then. Although the phone, I was surprised to find out, speaking of Alexander Graham Bell before, there was they did have phonic communications back, I think, in the 1880s. In the 1890s, it was very crude. It wasn't a good, high-quality sound, of course. They didn't have the ability to transmit things in long distances. But they did have the ability to send stuff along wires. And indeed, that's how telegraphs first worked. And I'm reading Grant's memoirs right now. And I guess I'm not surprised to find out that, the telegraph wires were big things that both sides were just cutting them down. That's how they kind of talked to each other. There was no email back then or cell phones. And it was all a single wire, and they would just send pulses of electricity down it, dot, dash, dot, dot, and dash. We all know SOS, right? Dot, 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 three, dot, 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 dot. S is and O is. And it's the whole code over there. That's how they sent a lot of transmissions. Very burdensome. but certainly phenomenal back in 1862 to be able to send a message to somebody that was 500 miles away. And I never thought about it before, but those lines were electrified. And what were they electrified with? There was no power grid back then. Batteries. They had batteries in the 1860s. Anyway, I digressed a little bit like that. So there's something remarkable about this song. You can see I take quite a few songs like that, but I'm just going to read a little excerpt from this one here. I'd seen the name of this song in the index in the back, and I thought I knew it, but it's a completely different song. This is C.C. Ryder, and I'm going to read you a little description here, just a bit. I don't know if warning is the same word. So I read text, the original, what it's there. So they are going to use the N-word. It's not the N-word that you think, but don't be. I hope you're not insulted by it. But this is just a description, and I read it here. I don't change text like that. John Lomax and I heard this song in Austin, Texas, in an old saloon. The Silver King operated as a soft drink parlor by a Mexican Negro, Martinez. After two Negroes with guitars had sung, quote, the original blues, Frankie and Johnny, Boll Weevil, and other pieces, Martinez himself favored us with C.C. Ryder, which may derive from Easy Rider. Even though the movie from the 60s, Easy Rider, C.C. Ryder. And some of you probably have heard a song, C.C. Ryder. I did go and listen on Alexa and heard a version of this, but not the one I thought was like. Anyway, let me get back to this. So they think it was the C.C. Ryder, which may derive from Easy Rider, C.C. Rider, Easy Rider. Language changes like that a lot. People hear one thing, and by the time it goes across generations or even miles or a little bit of both, it morphs a little bit from CC to Easy. The Sunside Special, a crack railroad train, had crossed Texas every day for many years. In the last line of the first verse, the word blowed, B-L-O-W-E-D, is given a long, slow, controlled, and powerful, like the whistle of an onrushing overland train on a southwestern prairie, like was the word shine in the last line of the second verse. And they said text B is from Gate Thomas and his South Texas Negro songs. So there's two versions of songs here, the A and the B. Now, I'm a little less interested in lyric, but I want you to listen to the music. I'm going to play the music here. And you can hear a little bit of kind of an older time of music, although I'm going to show you that this is a very popular pattern. Pardon me. A very popular pattern that is used even today. In fact, most pop music, it's exactly the same pattern here. I'll explain. So, C.C. Ryder, here we go. So the chords go like this. Like that. It's kind of like that. Let me play you the melody a little bit because it's interesting here, and I'm going to point something out to you about modern music. So the melody goes, that sunshine special coming around the bend, bend, bend. Listen to this note here. That sunshine special coming around the, it's a G note, the bend. To the other chord. And then it goes to, let's flip from the D. It blow just like, let me get it. It blow just like, it blow just like it never blowed before. And then it goes to blow just like it never been before. So let me view it again. So the first chord we have in A. And let's kind of attach some numbers to the chords. So we have A, B, C, D, E. Maybe I should do it the other way. A, B, C, D, E. So A is 1. A, B, C, D. D is 4. A, B, C, D, E is 5. So think of that. 1, 4, 5. If you know a musician, they talk to them, ask them if they know the 1, 4, 5 pattern. They're going to say, of course. I can play 10,000 songs with it, which is the point. So here it is again. It's a little antiquated. It kind of sounds like the sunshine, that sunshine. Let me get it here. The sunshine special coming around the bend. It blowed and blowed and blowed. It blowed and blowed and blowed. And it blowed just like it never blowed before. And they just kept repeating it. So we have 1, 4, 5. I'm going to change it a little bit. That was an A. I'm going to play 1, 4, 5 in G now. So it's G, G. Oh my God, G, G, A, B, C, D. G, right? Because the notes go from A, B, C, D, G, A, B, C, D, G. Got it right. So it's G, A, B, C, D. G is 1. G, A, B, C is 4. D is 5. So, and remember that one note I told you to pay attention to when it went special coming around the bend. So that G note in the A chord sounds like this. And you could kind of hear it in music today. Same pattern, 1, 4, 5. Thank you, Mr. Costello, for giving me this book. It was a gift for me many years ago. So this is Coffee House Companion. Can you see all the pink tags in it? These are all songs that are either 1, 4, 5, and sometimes they reverse the pattern. They play 1, 5, 4. It's the same pattern. That song had to be 100 years old. We're still using the same pattern today. For most popular music, centers around 1, 4, 5. Not every single song, but a lot. So let me kind of show you here. Well, a couple ones I think of. So here's the one. Let's play the... So there's a pattern, 1, 4, 5. Well, shake it up, baby, now. Twist and shout. Shake it up, baby, now. Come on and work it all out. You know you look so good. So you get the idea from the Beatles. Think of this song from the Young Rascals. I was feeling so bad. I asked my family doctor just what I had. I said, doctor, oh, Mr. MD. So you get the idea, right? Good Lovin' from the Rascals. Here's Pete Seeger's... I believe Pete Seeger wrote the chords for this. This was Jose Marti, the Cuban revolutionary. Guantanamera, listen. Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crecen las palmas, de donde crecen las palmas, y antes de morirme, quiero echar mis versos de alma. Let's do a couple of others here. Remember that song, Dance With Me? Dance. It's a higher key for me, but I'm going to play it in D G. Dance. Dance with me. I want to be your partner. That's good. Drift Away. You must know this song. So I'm going to go in another key, but so here's D. So it's A. But back to the original one. A, B, C, D, E. A is 1, D is 4, E is 5. Now sometimes they switch it around a little bit in music. So instead of starting with the 1, the A, this song starts with the fourth, the D. But it's still the 1-4-5 pattern. You know, people are trying to work with a limited pattern, make it sound different. Day after day, I'm so confused. Yet I look for the light in the pouring rain. You know that's a game I hate to lose. And I'm feeling the strain. Oh, ain't it a shame? Oh, give me the beat, boy. Free my soul. I'll get lost in the rockin'. Now drift away. See, there it is. 1, 5, 4. Beat, boys, and free my soul. There's the 1, the 5. Gonna get lost in your rock and roll. Now drift away. Let's see what else we got here. A couple of others. Yeah, you know, Free Fallin' by Tom Petty. It's kind of 1-4-5. It's, let's see. She's a good girl, loves her mama, loves Jesus and America too. So I was 1-5. One, 4, 5. Switch around a little bit. F. One, 4, back to the 1. I got you, baby. I got you, baby. 1-4-5. This one changes a little bit. It's still 1-4-5. Well, it's 1-5-4. But sometimes we substitute a C chord for an A minor chord that kind of sounds like a C. So here's one of the Dylan songs. Mama put my guns in the ground, 'cause I can't shoot them anymore. And that's it. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. 1-5, knocking on heaven's door. And even the chorus in Like a Rolling Stones. bit of Yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crecen las palmas. You can hear it. It's in there. Well, my bed's back. There's the 1 to the 4. Here you go. I'm standing here. There's the 1. Here's the 4. Outside my door. We're going to hear the 1, 4, and the 5. I hate to wake you up to say goodbye. Just like a Rolling Stone. 1, 4, 5 in the chorus. And even Mom Pajama rolled out of bed. She ran to the police station. Papa said, oh, if I get that boy, gonna, what is it? When Papa found out, he began to said, started the investigation. Well, I'm on my way. 1, 4, 5 is a very popular pattern. And this is only, I have dozens of music books. I could go through a lot of my music books with popular songs. And in fact, I will just could find dozens and dozens of songs like that. So, not much difference. 150 years apart. Still kind of the same. I'm going to take it 8:52. I'm going to take a little break for 5 minutes. If you want to text me. Does anybody text me? I don't think so. I'll play myself out a little harmonica break before my break here. Before my 5-minute break. Be back in about 2 minutes. There's the phone number. If you want to text me something, let me know that you're there. I'd appreciate it. See you in 2 minutes. down to Club Coqui, which is this room. Coqui being the Spanish word for frog. And if you know who Barbara is, you know that she was a big frog fan. Me and the frogs all over the place. I'm going to use my acoustic guitar instead of my Taylor Tees. Let me put it back up. A little bit of grape juice. Salud. I hope everybody's doing well in this new virtual world that we have. As I mentioned in the text and the email I sent to some of you, at 10:30 I'm going to be listening to a live show by Jeff Daniels, the actor and the musician. I'm getting the live stream through this several places to get it, but I'm getting it. Part of the money goes to the Town Crier in Beacon, so that's one of the reasons. And I saw Jeff Daniels' virtual show at the beginning of the summer. It was pretty good. He's been in a couple of movies. I saw Jeff Daniels in To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway. Let's hope we can get that venue back open like that. Anyway, 8:57 here. Let me tell you a little bit about what I hope to do with this program. I have plans now to maybe put on a show like this once a month. Putting it on even every weekend or something. It's a labor intensive. And it's hard to keep being original and keep coming up with stuff to keep people's interest. Better that people say, boy, I wish you did this show more, than people saying, enough already. So I'm going to do it maybe once a month, and I think the best way to do it would be to do it on the same day, like the last Saturday or the first Friday of the month or something like that. I'll figure it out. I think that probably weekends are a better time to do it. I'm thinking maybe a Friday night or a Saturday night, and I invite people to submit materials for here. Now I do have some other equipment I'm working on here. Pretty soon, I think I should be able to incorporate a couple of different video sources. So. Hopefully for next month, when I'll do the next show, I'll have my laptop and I'll be able to incorporate a PowerPoint program. And that might be nice when I was reading stories, maybe when I was reading the story about Anne Frank, that I could have shown a map of where she was or certain things like that, or even a chart of sign language. But if you have material you want to submit to me, you have a phone number there. You can do that, or those of you that have my private number, you can use that as well. Don't give it out to anyone else, please. Keep it for yourself. But the other number there, you saw when I was away. You can always send me something there. And I have a post office box number. Let me make sure that it's still up. You can always send me material there. Now, I don't want to get really very political. I think the political situation in America has become hyperbolic. It's just... I'm worried about how we're treating each other, and I don't want to see it, go into that direction. So I'm not suggesting that we can't talk about topics, but I don't know what I want to do. But I'm going to suggest that it's done somehow in a constructful way, that we can use our way of thinking about things to kind of improve things and make things better. Anyway, that's my take on it. One of the reasons that I played only little excerpts from a lot of those songs and played the song from Carl Sandburg's books here was because I have been running into a bit of an issue with copyright claims. And in fact, I've spoken to somebody from ASCAP, and I've contacted people at YouTube, and even this other organization called Live 365. I'll talk about that in a second. What I understood from YouTube was when I called ASCAP, which is the American Society for Composers, Artists, and Publishers or Producers. They told me that they had a license with YouTube, which would explain how when you go on YouTube, there's just millions and millions of people sharing music with everybody. I mean, I have my own little set list like that. I happen to like Peter Gabriel, In Your Eyes. I must watch that, I don't know, 100 times a year. And when I look at how many hits are on those songs, some of them run into the millions. I suppose it's good for the artist that gets their song around it. It's kind of, I guess, free publicity. But I also understand it from the perspective of the artist saying, well, that's great that you're all playing my song, but the fact is I'm not making a dime from it. As someone who owns a couple of copyrights, I understand that I've never sold my song, but I certainly understand it. Here's what I'm working on. I contacted this, it's called Live 365, and it's an internet radio. You can get your internet radio station, and depending on how many listeners you have and what kind of quality you want and how much storage space you want, you can, it's a monthly fee, and they cover all those licenses. There are three main licenses that I know. There's ASCAP, there's Seascape, and there's BMI. And generally, artists their copyrights are protected by one of those three organizations. So I could go with a live radio show and pay for to make sure that I'm covering the copyrights, and I could do an internet radio show. I contacted them and said, well, suppose I buy that license to play that music with you on your system, and I just do my live YouTube show, and I just kind of have the music in the background when I want to take a break, because I thought that would be a good thing then, instead of me talking all the time, to play a little music here and there. Until I kind of sort that all out. 365 got back to me and said, well, you're covered from our perspective, but once you broadcast over YouTube, that's another medium, and we can't cover you for that. That's not us, it's somebody else. So I've got to kind of figure this out. The reason, how I got away with, no copyright protection there on those songs that I played, because I didn't play the full songs. So there is a thing called of the fair use doctrine. The fair use doctrine works very well for teachers. All this remote learning that's going on, virtual learning, teachers are reading from books and material. All those books and material that they're reading from it's all copyright protected. But teachers say, I can't. Generally with if it's copyright protected, you have to, once an artist, a musician or an artist or a writer publishes something, once it's published, then it becomes published domain, and people, like for music, people can play that song, but they have to contact the artist and say, by the way, I'm doing your song. And what I understand it to be is that the reason why you tell artists that is so that they can either say, don't worry, copyright free, or I have a copyright, but I like what you're doing, you can use it for free, or probably in a lot of instances, especially if someone said, well, I'm doing your song, and in fact, I put it on my album and I sold 100,000 copies of my album, you better believe that the artist who wrote that song is going to say, and you owe me X amount for each song. Probably the lawyers figure all that out. But a fair use doctrine, particularly for teachers, even if I wanted to play a record or a song or something, is like, yeah, but I just thought of it that morning for my class. I couldn't take the time to contact you and get an answer back from you. Could I use your material? I'm using it this way. So the fair use doctrine allows people to do things like that in the case of urgency. Or in the case of what I did over there, I don't believe I'm violating any copyright law at all by introducing all those little songs that are similar in their chord pattern. Indeed, actually, you can make an argument to say everybody's ripping everybody else off. That's not what I mean to say. but you get the point. I'm only taking little snippets of it and trying to make a point about it like that. If I actually started playing those songs full, then I could see how somebody could come to me and say there might be a copyright claim against this, which is exactly what happened to me on my YouTube channel. So I immediately took all that material down and made it private. I recorded some other songs like that. If you go look on Stephen Plays, if you look in the playlist, I think that one of the playlists is Solo Stephen. I do a version of Old Man River. It's almost 100 years old. I believe for that song the copyright has worn out. Anyway, that's what's about with the home music thing and copyrights like that. So let me play some music that won't have to worry about the copyright because I own the copyright. So 845-545-3892. You want to text me or call me. So let's see. I wrote this song about 20 years ago. It's called If You. I visited Amsterdam in the summer of 2000 and went to the Frank House. It's now a museum. And I suppose most people know the story of Anne Frank. In the Netherlands, the whole country is like 10 feet below sea level. And so it's not a big place. Everything's very compacted. Like a lot of townhomes, all the older homes like that. Very narrow houses, maybe 15, 20 feet, very compacted, 50 houses on a block, and several stories up, 4 or 5 stories up. There's a canal everywhere in Amsterdam, particularly where the Frank House is. It's on the Prince Canal, the Prinsgracht, I think it's pronounced in Dutch. And even though the houses kind of go up, and there's houses in the back, sometimes it might be that you look at this house here and you see a 4th floor, but in fact the 4th floor of the house could belong to the house next to it, not necessarily the one that it's on top of. And it also, that situation also happens with the depth of an apartment. So you might have an apartment this big, and for 3 floors, and on the 4th floor it looks like this, but actually there's another section that goes up, and it's almost a 4th floor over the building behind it, but the people behind it only have 3 floors. That's where the secret annex was. It was up there, and what they did, as a lot of people know, was they made a bookcase door so they could come in and out of the annex. There was about 8 people up there. It was the Franks. There was 4 Franks. There was the family with Peter, and there was the dentist. So there was, I think, 8 people there. So it was pretty compacted, but they still needed to come out once in a while. And the annex was above the spice store that Otto Frank owned. So we could come down like that. They could get out of it. During the daytime, they had to just stay up in the annex. They had to be careful that they didn't open any of the curtains on the 4th floor. You know, the Germans had taken over Amsterdam at this point. The Gestapo was driving all through the streets. If you read Anne Frank's diary, she will tell you that she watched many of her neighbors and her friends being dragged out of their apartments, and some shot right on the street, some dragged away, all from the top floor over there. And of course they were aghast, but they couldn't do anything because they didn't want anyone to know they were there. And their secret worked for a while, but then they were discovered. Most of the lyric for this song I wrote by sitting right across the street from, there was the canal. There's a canal on the street and the Anne Frank house. And there was a little park bench there, and I sat there and wrote most of the lyrics over there. Most of the music I wrote back here in the United States. This is If You. If you were my friend, I would have helped you to survive. If you had want of water, food, medicine, I'd provide. If you needed hope to see a future, I'd provide. Could do, I'd do what I could to make it happen, or in dying try. Do you remember those sunny days you played down on the street at Prince Canal? Did you ever think you'd see such sad days? He knew Otto saw the bad times coming, had to run away to a hideaway, place to stay a while. The storm blew. Was who that betrayed the secret addict, the hidden door? Before they would have come, I could have warned you. Run for your life. Did you hear the footsteps on the stairs on the day that they took you away? Did you ask him why they hated you? Oh, what could they say? What could they say? It's true. It's always the children of war's fate that fall in harm's way. Today, you know we could really make it happen. Ceasefire, desire, a world at peace for all the children, forevermore. For every and everywhere, every innocent young kid, it's about time we did. What do you say? You know we can save the world just because it's ours to change and ours to live with, in and ours to die, hopefully a ripe old day. Great juice. Barbara and I, when we first moved up here, we went down to the Beacon train station. There's the Beacon Lawn Dock, and there's another dock down there. The Clearwater docks there a lot. In the summertime, you can take a trip down the Clearwater. The Clearwater is that sloop that Pete Seeger helped get together, and it was a way to bring environmental focus to the Hudson River. Pete Seeger was known for that, among other things, and a lot of people say he was the impetus for cleaning up the Hudson River, which has gotten a lot cleaner. That's good for everybody, for the fishermen, for the people that swim in it, for the people that boat in it, for the eagles that get their food out of it and eat that food, and then pass that along to their chicks and their eggs and such. So cleaning up the Hudson River was a remarkable feat, and we owe it to Pete. Well, made a little rhyme there. How about that? Anyway, Barbara and I, we always like, there's a nice walk down by the Hudson, and we were going for a walk, and when we got out, we parked, I think it was a Saturday, we parked our car in the parking lot and started walking over, and we noticed at the end of one of the docks, there were about 100 chairs set up, folding chairs. No, maybe not even that. Maybe like 50 folding chairs set up. And somebody was setting up a sound system. And there was this guy, he had like a red cap on, red wool cap, and kind of a, the worker man blue shirt, like the blue denim shirt like that. And he was a tall guy. And his back was to us, and we were really paying attention. But we were going to go for a hike, so we weren't sure what this was about. We didn't see any signs. And Barbara says to me, "Hey, isn't that Pete Seeger over there?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it is him." We knew that he lived up here, and he lived in Beacon. He lived up on the mountain in Beacon, a little bit south of the town. And he hung out in Beacon a lot. And there's the Beacon Yacht Club, I think, or the boat club. It's down at the river. He was very much a part of that. And sure enough, it was Pete Seeger. And first then he had a sledgehammer, and we were like, what is he doing with that? He sang like an old, a work gang song, and struck the hammer, to kind of keep the beat. A lot of those old blues songs, we might, they're on CDs and we kind of love them, but some of them are used to make sure everybody, when a lot of the chain gangs down in the South were building levees and building railroads, everybody had to strike that rail at the same time with a hammer, so they would use songs so that they could coordinate it, so people weren't hitting each other in the head with sledgehammers. Anyway, for someone, he was pretty old at that point. He seemed to swing it pretty good. He didn't do it that long, and he kind of put it down. I guess he made the point. But then he said something to everybody, and I'll just never forget it. And he picked up his 12-string guitar, and he said, "Oh, you know this song better than I do." And he started doing Turn, Turn, Turn. And we all just sang along with him. It was very impromptu. There were maybe 50 or 60 people there. And I think it was probably one of the most remarkable music moments in my life, I have to say, because of the spontaneity, and because of how genuine it was and how sincere it was. I'm not going to do that song for you, but I am going to do a song that I wrote about Pete Seeger. I've been struggling with the name of it, and I'm still writing more words for the song. I wanted to kind of call him St. Peter, but I have a feeling that he wouldn't like that, and his family wouldn't like it, and people might get a little confused. And then I said maybe I could say San Pedro and kind of fool them by using Spanish, but I'm like, no, that wouldn't work either. So for now, I'll just call it Pete Seeger, but there's something about the word seems a little bit tough for me. This is still in the works, this song. If You is finished. I do have a CD version of If You, and in the next, when things get back to normal, hopefully in the spring, I do plan on having a show at the Town Crier, a CD release show, just maybe a small CD, 3. I'm thinking of a 3 CD song called 3 for Free. And any of you out there that want to kind of join me in the show, well, we've talked about it before, and you can talk to me about it again. Anyway, this song will kind of be on it. It's still incomplete, but I'll play you as much as I have. Pete Seeger lived on top of that hill, and his words resonate still down through the valley of the river he loved. And beyond those words he begged us to sing. They give us hope. Let me start over. Haven't played it in a while. Going to the way. I know what it is. I need some grape juice. 9:21. Doing really good, right on time. All right, here we go. Pete Seeger lived on top of that hill, and his words resonate still down through the valley of the river he loved. And beyond those songs he begged us to sing. They give us hope and showed us a way out of the darkness and into the light. He was a man of peace, champion for the underdog, a lover of right, who would fight a fight to right a wrong. Well, that's all I have right now. Sorry. I hope you liked it. I hope that's intriguing, that you want to kind of listen to it. I have to work out some other words about it. But I think it'd be a good song. $9:23, a little bit ahead of schedule. That's fine with me. I can't really play any songs because I'm a little concerned about the copyright thing. Let me talk about another song I'm working on, and I'll just kind of talk about it. Her name was Elizabeth Cochran. She was born near Pittsburgh in the late 1880s. And she was one of, I think, like 20 children. There were a lot of kids back then. Her father had like 12 children with his first wife, and she died, probably from having all them kids. She died, and he got married again and had 5 more kids. And he was quite a successful businessman, well, sort of. But when he died, he forgot to leave resources and money to that second family with the 5 kids. As I understand it, the first family did okay, but the second family, they were just out on their own. I think they had to leave their house. And Elizabeth Cochran, well, what was she going to do? Here she was, this young girl. She kind of did a couple of things. She went to, I think, the Pennsylvania Normal School. Normal schools, that's what they called teachers' schools back in the 19th century, a normal school. I don't understand the reference, but that's what they called it. She wanted to be a teacher, but after the first year, she ran out of money to attend the school. It wasn't a public school. She had to pay for it. So she had to leave. And she was she read a story in the newspaper where one of the editors said, you know, young girls should just kind of stay home and just have babies and just be subservient to the men. and she did not like that. And she wrote a letter to the editor saying, expressing her displeasure. And the editor was so impressed by the letter that he brought her into the newspaper, put an ad in the newspaper. I think she sent the letter anonymously, and the ad was, I want to speak to you, Little Orphan Girl. In fact, that's what I think I'm going to call the name of the song, Little Orphan Girl. Come forward, Little Orphan Girl. And she did, and she got a job writing for the newspaper. She was first, I think she did, like the society columns. She didn't want to do that. She wanted to write intense news articles. She wanted to be a reporter. So they gave her this far assignment. She went to Mexico, and if from what I read is correct, basically she took the rights. She took the side of poor people. She was reporting for what was going on in Mexico, and they did not like that in Mexico, and they were going to arrest her or something, and she snuck out of the country and got back. She came back to New York. And then the editor, I think, put her back in charge of, the society page, talking about what was going on in, the city. But she didn't like that. And the newspaper editor said, I'll tell you what, let's think about doing this. Let's see if you could beat Phineas Fogg's record around the world. Phineas Fogg was the fictional character in Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days. And what the editor of the newspaper proposed for Nellie Bly was see if she could beat Phineas Fogg's fictional record around the world. And I'm not going to tell you if she did it or not, but she certainly became. You have to listen to the song, or you could check up on it. Let's leave it kind of intriguing like that. But she was very smart because we're talking about, I think it was the 1890s, or near the end of the 19th century. So she had to take a boat most of the times, of course, and railways. But some of the connections were well established between, the East Coast of the United States and England and places like that. But there were other places that it was tougher like that. And when you go check her out, which I'm sure some of you will do, and I hope so, what you'll notice is that the coat she's wearing is a very long coat, a plaid coat, and it's a full-length coat, goes all the way down like that. And she's always pictured in that, and a long dress underneath it, and a little bag, a bag about this long, leather bag, this long, about that wide, about that deep. And that's all she took with her. Took her around the world in 1890. I read up on it a little bit like that. The long coat she knew she'd be in cold climates. So she wore the long coat so she didn't have to pack it, was wise. And she wore the long dress. In fact, she had a special dress made. She went to a seamstress and said, I need something that's really rugged material. This is the only dress I'm going to be taking. And of course, she bought lots of pairs of underwear. And she was known for the big jar of cold cream. She always took cold cream with her. For some reason, in all the stories that pop up about her, she has that big jar of cold cream and like that. So, do you really want to know whether she beat the record? Yes, she did, actually. She did. It was pretty close, but she did. Along the way, I think in Indonesia or something like that, she picked up a pet monkey. So, to me, I just love the sight of this young girl who was 18 and 19 years old, this long coat, and a little hat, too. The little hat that I think matched. It was a Scottish cap, kind of matched in design of the jacket. Of course, every girl in the world was wearing these long coats and the cap. It was probably the first really big example of marketing. Everybody wanted one of those coats that Nellie Bly had, and everybody wanted one of the hats. The way that the newspapers capitalized on her journey was she would keep sending wires back, telegraphs back about where she wasn't reporting on it. And they were constant. She was always sending reports back. They even came up with a little board game like Monopoly and Nellie Bly. I guess it's like Where in the World is Carmen? I can't think of the name. You know what I'm talking about. But that wasn't enough for her. She came back and she wanted to do more. And she went to New York, and using her credentials from the Pittsburgh newspaper, she contacted Joseph Pulitzer at the New York Telegram. I'll have to check the name of it. And he gave us something very daring to do. Blackwell's Island, which is now Roosevelt Island, in the late 1800s, there was an insane asylum. And there was a section for women. And it was reported that the people, once you went out there, you never came back. And it might have looked clean, it might have looked sanitized, but the stories of how people were treated were horrible. But Joseph Pulitzer didn't know for sure, and so what he told Elizabeth Cochran, Nellie Bly, that was her pen name, he said, let's try this. You get yourself committed, they'll take you in there, and in 10 days, I'll send my lawyers there, and we'll come and get you out, and then you can write about it. And she practiced being crazy. She got good at it. She spoke a little Spanish once in a while. I think she threw that in because I probably just confused some people in New York. I don't think there were a lot of Spanish speakers back then. And she did other things. She frizzled her hair up like that. And in fact, she did get committed. And went in and found out just how horrible it was. And when Joseph Pulitzer went to get her, that I'm not going to tell you. You'll have to wait for my song or read the story. But it's a very compelling thing. It was the first time that they called it a stunt, that she was pretending to do something. A lot of journalists say that kind of journalism never happened before. What would have happened before Nellie Bly did that stunt was they would just go to Blackwell's Island and say, we've heard, stories about how things were bad out here. What can you tell us? And I'm sure if things were going on bad, that people weren't going to admit it. The people running the institution were going to say, we don't know what you're talking about. Everything is fine. So this was a way of kind of getting the inside scoop of it. And most people say that was the first time that kind of journalism happened. You might be able to figure out that, in fact, they did find out what was going on in the prison. And it did change the laws in New York State quite a bit when they found out just how horrific some of the things were. She met a couple of people in there. She was convinced the only reason somebody was in there because they didn't speak English. And when somebody was interviewing this person, they thought that she was just an idiot or something, but she just didn't understand what they were talking about. And she also came across a woman who, her husband just stuck her in there because I guess he just had her committed, and she wasn't insane at all, but she didn't know how to get out. She does tell this one story of, she really got good at acting like she was crazy, but once she was in there, then she stopped acting like that and just tried to act sane. And she remarked that the more that she tried to tell people that she really wasn't crazy and act normal, the more they didn't believe her. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm working on that song now. That might probably be one of the 3 songs that I'll put on my CD. I'm thinking of calling it Little Orphan Girl. I mean, I don't know enough of the song. I'll play you the rhythm now. So Nellie, you went your own way around the world in less than 80 days. So that's a song. Now all I need is the lyric. I do have the lyric. I find this a challenging song to kind of write because I have to think. There's so much that I could say about her, and the song isn't that long. I don't want to make it one of those songs with 20 verses in it. I have to kind of really think this one out like that. And we're at 9:36 in the atomic clock, and I thought I would sign off with this. It's another story. I was teaching at Lehman it was 1990, 1997, 98, and I taught a class in remedial writing. It was for students. There was a college writing exam, and if you didn't pass the entrance writing exam, you came into my class, and you couldn't get out of these remedial level classes until you passed the test. And students wanted to get out of these classes because they were 4 hours a week, but you had to pay for 8 hours of time. Most college classes, if it's 3 credits, it's 3 hours, you pay for 3 hours. But remedial classes, at least in Lehman College and I think the City University of New York, you had to pay double for it. So it was an incentive also to kind of pass the test. Anyway, the classes were usually rather large. This was a summer class. I would have there were a lot of people not passing that test coming right out of high school. And I had kids coming out of high school, and then I had adults who graduated high school, but then went and got a job and decided they wanted a college degree. So I had the two sorts of students like that. It was always a very packed class. I loved the classes, actually. Well, I found that it wasn't that these people couldn't write. It's that they just couldn't write to just kind of pass the test. It was a little bit different. And it wasn't that they needed a lot of things. In fact, I usually just saw that, it was one, two, or three things that need a little bit of tweaking. If somebody has a problem knowing where to put a period in a sentence, if in an essay they make that mistake 50 times, well, that's not 50 mistakes if you can get them to understand how to, correctly punctuate a sentence. It's one problem, and there's one solution. So it was like that. I remember this day, and it was the first day of class, and very packed, and I think I was working on campus. I had other jobs, so I was in another place, and I came, and there was a lot of people inside the class, and I remember there was a woman. No. Yes, I remember there was a older woman in the class with a guy that looked like maybe 25, 28, like that. And, well, how do I put this gently? You could tell he was different from everybody else. I don't mean that in a pejorative way at all. But you could tell there was just something different about him. John was his name. I remember him. And I got up and explained the whole class, what they had to go do, that we were going to work on helping them write so they could pass this test. But I also wanted to make it interesting. And indeed, all those classes, what we did at the end of the class was we made a little magazine. Everybody wrote an article, and then I made up copies for everybody and kind of gave them out like that. And they really got into it. And it certainly helped their writing. A lot of these people were writing articles comparative to some stuff I was reading in magazines, and I kid you not, because years later, when I was teaching at the graduate level and I was teaching students in a reading program, I would take some of the writings from students in my class and find an article or a story in a book that was similar to it, and I would put them both in the book so someone couldn't see which one I was reading from, and to read them both. And I would ask the students in that master's level class which one was the student writing and which one was the professional writing, and a lot of times they just couldn't tell the difference. So these things it was a good motivation for them. Anyway, at the end of that first class, everybody gets up and everybody leaves, and as I walk outside, I see that woman and John standing there. And John is standing a little bit off by himself over there. And his mother comes up to me. It turned out it was his mother. And she said, "Look, I hope you don't mind, but my son is slightly mentally retarded. I think that's what she said. Or she might have said challenged. I know the terms changed for this over the years. But I think she might have said, I forget what she said, but I knew what she was talking about. And she said, well, I hope you don't mind that he's in your class, but we don't know if he's ever going to get a college degree. But it meant everything to him to at least kind of go to college. And she says, I hope you don't mind. And I'm like, if the college that I'm in, he's more than welcome in my class. I always started my classes, every single time I ever taught a class, whether it was at the master's level, the undergraduate level, kindergarten, 8th grade, I always started my classes with a read aloud. Always. Usually not something long, something short. Sometimes it was related to what the lesson was about, and I would have planned it out. But other times I didn't have to plan it out. And on one particular day, I grabbed something at the last moment. Because I knew I had to read aloud something, and I already had the lesson plan. I don't think I could find anything that was related to the lesson. So I just picked something up at the last moment. And I'm reading it aloud, and I came across this word. Does anybody know what the word perambulator is? Because I didn't know. So I'm reading aloud, and I come across the word perambulator. And to me, it was always a good idea to let students know that just because I'm the teacher doesn't mean I know everything. Maybe I don't know some words. There's some stuff that you know that I don't know, vice versa. So it was always good for me to, instead of pretending that I, knew what the word was or trying to fake it, I looked up at the class and I said, oh, perambulator. Anybody know what this word means? One hand goes up. One hand. Guess about who you think it is. Now, let me back up just a little bit. When I was in 8th grade, there was a class, and there was a special education class. And everybody in the school called the kids the retards. Not even R-E-T-A-R-T, we pronounce it like retards. That's what we call them. And I don't think it was necessarily vicious. It certainly wasn't a kind thing to do. I was, 10 years old. What did I know? The word, retarded, in French, actually, it means slow or delayed. And Binet, where the IQ test comes from, and the Binet Stanford. Binet is the French guy. Stanford was the American university that kind of incorporated those ideas. When Binet came up with the idea of trying to measure intelligence quotients, it was not to be pejorative and not to label people stupid or anything like that, but for a very functional purpose to say, okay, so let's see, this person is 10 years old, but they seem to be operating at an intellectual level of maybe somebody who's 8 years old. And we just want to know that so we can help this person. Binet's concept of IQ and being retarded wasn't at all. The Americans, I think, we distorted it by, today, let's face it, when I call those kids the retards, it wasn't a kind thing. And you hear people say it a lot, oh, he's retarded. It's usually meant as an insult, but not in French. And in French, when you say je suis un retard, you're not saying I'm stupid, you're saying I'm late. Je suis un retard. So does anybody know what the word perambulator is? And only one hand goes up. You guessed it. Whose is it? And John says, so matter-of-factly, oh, that's the British word for baby carriage. Not only did he know what the word meant, he knew the etymology of it. I remember just when he said that, looking at the rest of the class, and there's 25 people looking at me, and I'm all looking at them. Nobody said a word. Because we all knew At that moment, the smartest guy in the room was the retard. Yeah. I can't remember the rest of the school year, but I'm sure that I know my perspective changed about about judging people, and I was usually pretty good at it already because I had a couple of great teachers who taught me about assessing people and being careful about it. But I even had to remind myself that you need to kind of step back all the time and think about something. Yeah, John was the smartest guy in the room at that point, and we all knew it. And at the end of the year, his magazine article, I don't even think I read his whole article. You know, the Ken Follett books? That guy had read every single Ken Follett book, and he wrote a report of like all of them. He wrote me an essay of like 5,000 words, like I passed the guy anyway. I don't even know if I had time to read the whole thing, but he was just an excellent reader. I'll never forget that day. It changed everything. It always reminded me to stop and think about something before you make a judgment. 9:45 on the atomic clock. A little bit earlier, but that's okay. So I want to wish everybody happy holidays, a happy new year. Let's hope things get better. I can't say how they can get any worse. And do something nice for someone.